Is a carb a carb? So carbs have become extremely controversial at the moment, and people are becoming really paranoid about eating carbs. And they often just get lumped into categories of being either really good or bad, or all bad. So I just want to explain what carbs are and the different types of carbohydrates. So we all probably know that there's sugar. Every carbohydrate is actually made up of sugar. They're just put together a little bit differently. So straight up sugars like table sugar, honey, fruit juice, those sugars are really easy to digest, basic, simple sugars. So we take them on board really quickly, we get a bit of an energy spike immediately, and often then a drop off. And this is quite different to a more complex carb. So more complex carbs are the carbohydrates found in whole grains, in fruits and vegetables when they're in their whole form. So these actually have quite complex structures which are harder to break down by the body and actually react quite differently in the body compared to the more simple sugars. The other type of carbohydrate is fibre. Often people don't even realise this is a carbohydrate. So fibre comes in the form of soluble and insoluble fibre. So in insoluble fibre, our body doesn't actually even break that down, so we don't get a calorie load from it. The insoluble fibre is really important though for bowel health, and it's important for feeding the probiotics in our gut. So they use that for their energy and for your good gut health. Insoluble fibre does get broken down and absorbed into the bloodstream, and it has many benefits such as good circulation and heart health. So you may have heard of the term high GI or low GI. GI stands for glycemic index. Foods that have a high GI tend to hit our bloodstream and cause a rapid rise in blood sugar. And what this then does to the body, it signals the release of insulin into the bloodstream to then draw out the sugar out of our bloodstream. A sugar can be really damaging left in the bloodstream, and it pulls it into the fat cell. So we tend to get a rapid rise in energy followed by a really sharp decline where we suddenly feel tired, and then we're ready for our next sugar hit. So some things that are high GI are things that are absorbed quickly, like basic sugars, confectionery, like lollies, fruit juices. Most fruit juices have a really high glycemic, and even within carbs there's differences in your carbs. So white rice, for example, will have a higher GI than a more dense whole grainy type of carbohydrate. Low GI foods, as opposed to high, take longer to release that sugar into the bloodstream, so they don't cause that massive insulin spike. And they're much better for our health long term. So if we tend to try and stick with more low GI foods in our diet compared to high, we'll find that our health is much better. We'll have less inflammation in the body, and we'll feel fuller for longer, and we'll have more sustained energy. High GI can be very useful though if you're training for prolonged periods of time and you need energy. You can take in a high GI carbohydrate, which will be instantly absorbed into the bloodstream and give you that energy. It won't cause the insulin response because you're using that energy straight out of the bloodstream. Glycemic index can be affected by different foods on a plate. So say we might have a higher GI food, say we have some rice on our plate, but then we also add in some protein and some fat and even some fibrous vegetables, will actually change that glycemic index. Those things in with that high GI will actually slow down the absorption overall. So by mixing up things a little bit, you can play around with that glycemic load. And then just to add a little extra, we all actually respond differently to different foods. Some of us will get a blood sugar response from something and others of us won't. So probably the best rule of thumb is to try and stay clear generally of the really high GI foods. Rather than fruit juice, go for a whole piece of fruit, and try and keep that blood sugar under control for the maintenance of long-term health.